The summons. The celestial throne chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, its vaulted ceiling lost in artificial nebulae that swirled with the colors of 1,000 conquered worlds. Commander Lyra Voss stood at the entrance, her worn combat boots leaving faint prints on the mirror-like floor. Behind her, the other human representatives waited. Dr. Cale Winters, whose cybernetic eye whirred softly as it calculated angles and distances, and Ambassador Thane Meridian, whose diplomatic smile had already begun to fade. For 3 centuries, the sovereign collective had ruled the galaxy with absolute authority. 47 species bowed before the Council of Ascendants, each one having proven their worth through technology, culture, or military might. Humanity had been granted observer status 15 years ago, a probationary period before being judged worthy of full membership. Today that judgment had arrived. "They're making us walk," Cale muttered, his voice barely audible. Psychological warfare. Classic dominance display. Lyra didn't respond. She'd learned to read rooms like this during the border wars, when human colonies had fought off raiders from the fringe systems. Every detail mattered. The council sat on elevated thrones arranged in a semicircle, each representing a different pillar of galactic civilization. The Vreks, with their crystalline exoskeletons that refracted light into weapon-grade lasers. The Namathi, whose collective consciousness spanned billions of minds across their homeworld. The Keldrin, masters of gravitational manipulation who could fold space itself. And at the center, Supreme Arbiter Zephyr, a being so ancient that historians debated whether he was biological or had transcended into something else entirely. His form shifted like liquid mercury, never quite solid, never quite gas. Humans, Zephyr's voice resonated through the chamber without sound, touching directly into their minds. "You stand before us at the culmination of your observation period. We have watched your species with great interest." Thane stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over. "Supreme Arbiter, honored council members, humanity is grateful for this opportunity to..." Silence. A Vrex counselor named Crystallix raised one razor-sharp appendage. "We have reviewed your species thoroughly. Your technology is derivative. Your culture is fractured. Your biology is weak. You wage wars among yourselves even as you seek to join our unified collective." Lyra's jaw tightened. She'd lost half her battalion defending the outer rim from Vrex raiders who ignored collective law. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Furthermore," a Namathi counselor added, "its 1,000 voices speaking in perfect harmony, your psychological profiles show dangerous individuality. You resist harmonization. You question authority. These traits have no place in our ordered galaxy." Dr. Winters couldn't contain himself. "Ordered? Your order has stagnated for 200 years. No major scientific breakthroughs. No cultural evolution. You've created a museum, not a civilization." The temperature in the chamber dropped 10 degrees. Frost began forming on the obsidian floor. "Bold words," Zephyr observed, "from a species that has barely left its own solar neighborhood. Tell us, humans, why should we grant you membership? What can you offer that the 47 established species cannot?" Lyra knew this was their moment. She'd been chosen not for her diplomacy but for her honesty. She stepped forward, past Thane's restraining hand, past Cale's warning glance. "We offer what you've forgotten," she said clearly. "We offer challenge. Growth. The refusal to accept that this is as good as it gets." A ripple moved through the council. Several members leaned forward in their thrones. "The galaxy was supposed to be infinite," Lyra continued. "Endless possibilities, countless wonders waiting to be discovered. But you stopped exploring. Stopped questioning. Stopped dreaming. You enforce your rules not because they create a better universe, but because they're comfortable." "You speak of dreams," Crystallix hissed. "We speak of stability. Order. Peace." "You speak of stagnation," Lyra countered. "And that's why you're afraid of us." Supreme Arbiter Zephyr's form solidified slightly, taking on almost humanoid proportions. "Afraid? Explain." "In 15 years of observation, you've watched us solve problems you declared unsolvable. We created quantum fold drives without gravitational manipulation. We cured the Scarlet Plague that killed millions of Keldrin. We negotiated peace between the Thorik tribes that had warred for centuries. Not because we're smarter or stronger but because we approach problems differently." "And how do you approach them?" Zephyr asked. Lyra smiled grimly. "We assume there's always another way. You've built a galaxy on the idea that you have all the answers. We're built on the certainty that we don't." The council chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the nebulae above. After what felt like an eternity, Zephyr spoke again. The council will deliberate. You will receive our judgment in 3 cycles. Until then you are confined to the diplomatic quarters. Dismissed. As the humans turned to leave, Lyra caught sight of something in Zephin's shifting features. Something that might have been concern. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it was recognition of a truth he'd been avoiding for far too long. The galaxy's order was about to be challenged, and neither human nor alien was fully prepared for what would come next. The fracture. The diplomatic quarters were a gilded cage. Transparent walls offered a view of the Sovereign Collective's capital station, Axiom Prime, where thousands of ships from dozens of species moved in perfectly choreographed patterns. Everything about the collective screamed efficiency, order, perfection. Lyra found it suffocating. "They're going to reject us," Thane said, pacing near the viewport. "That speech might have cost us everything." "We were already losing," Kale countered, adjusting his cybernetic eye to scan beyond visible wavelengths. "The decision was made before we entered that chamber. They don't want partners. They want subordinates." Lyra was examining something else entirely. A data tablet she'd been given access to, supposedly containing records of past species induction ceremonies. But hidden in the metadata, buried beneath layers of encryption that would have been impenetrable to most species, she'd found something else. A pattern. "Kale, look at this," she said, transferring the data to his neural interface. "The collective's expansion stopped exactly 237 years ago. The last species to join were the Orothics, a peaceful merchant culture with minimal military capability. So they've been selective," Thane offered. "No," Kale breathed, his eye whirring as it processed the information. "They've been declining. Look at the exploration logs. 300 years ago, the collective was launching deep space missions constantly. Now, nothing. They haven't sent a single ship beyond the Helios border in over 2 centuries. Why?" Lyra asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's entrance irised open. A figure entered, moving with deliberate stealth despite its massive size. It was Draven, a Keldran warmaster Lyra had fought alongside during the Scarlet Plague crisis. His gravity-manipulating abilities made him one of the most formidable warriors in the galaxy. "I should not be here," he said without preamble, his voice like grinding stone. "But you deserve to know the truth before the Council destroys you." "Destroys?" Thane's diplomatic composure cracked. Draven moved to the viewport, gesturing toward the seemingly peaceful station beyond. "The Sovereign Collective is dying. We are a civilization in terminal decline, held together only by rigid control and fear of change." He activated a holographic projector, and the room filled with star charts. 240 years ago, we encountered something at the edge of explored space. We called it the Silence. Entire solar systems going dark, not destroyed but simply ceasing to exist on any scanning frequency we possess. Lyra felt ice form in her stomach. "You're running. The entire collective is running from something." "We are hiding," Draven corrected. "The Council made a decision to consolidate, to pull back all exploration and create an impenetrable sphere of defended space. They believed that if we remained quiet, stayed small, the Silence would pass us by. But it's not passing," Kale said, studying the charts. "It's getting closer. Slower than you thought, but inevitable." Draven's expression was grim. "The Council knows this. Which is why they cannot allow humanity to join. Your species represents everything they have tried to eliminate. Risk-taking. Exploration. The belief that problems can be solved rather than avoided. They're afraid we'll question their strategy," Lyra realized. "Afraid we'll encourage other species to start asking why they're hiding instead of fighting." "More than that," Draven said. "They are afraid you will discover what lies at the heart of the Silence. What it really is." The chamber shook suddenly. Alarms began blaring throughout Axiom Prime. Through the viewport, Lyra saw ships breaking formation, confusion spreading through the ordered patterns like ink in water. "Impossible," Draven breathed. "The Silence doesn't move this quickly. We had decades left." Kale's cybernetic eye was processing multiple data streams. "It's not the Silence. It's something else. Multiple ships dropping out of fold space at the system's edge. Configuration unknown. They're not in any database." The communication panel activated without input, and Supreme Arbiter Zephin's face materialized. His usual composure was gone, replaced by something that might have been panic. "All species representatives are to proceed immediately to their vessels and prepare for emergency evacuation. This is not a drill." "What's happening?" Thane demanded. For a moment, Zephin looked directly at Lyra, and she saw something in those alien eyes that chilled her more than any threat. It was resignation. Defeat. "They have found us," Zephyr said simply. "The progenitors have returned." The transmission cut off. Through the viewport, Lyra saw massive shapes emerging from fold space. Ships that dwarfed anything the collective possessed, their hulls covered in geometry that hurt to look at directly. They moved without engines, without any visible means of propulsion, as if reality itself was bending to accommodate their presence. Progenitors. Lyra looked at Draven. Who are they? The Keldron warrior's gravity field fluctuated wildly, a sign of extreme stress. The oldest species in the galaxy. The ones who seeded life across the stars billions of years ago. The ones who decreed that younger species must prove themselves worthy before advancing. The ones who created the Council. And they've been gone for millennia, Kale added, piecing it together. Until now. They return every epoch to judge whether their children have evolved sufficiently, Draven explained. The collective has hidden the truth of previous judgments. Species that failed were not merely denied advancement. They were erased from existence, their worlds rendered lifeless, their history deleted from all records. A second tremor shook the station, more violent than the first. One of the progenitor vessels was scanning Axiom Prime, and wherever its beam touched, systems failed. Lights dimmed. Gravity fluctuated. Entire sections of the station went dark. The Council called them, Lyra realized with horror, to judge humanity. To prove we're unworthy so they don't have to deal with us themselves. And in doing so, Kale said quietly, they may have doomed us all. Because if the progenitors are here to judge humanity, they'll judge the entire collective as well. Through the viewport, more vessels emerged. Thousands of them, an armada that made the collective's defensive fleet look like children's toys. And at the center of the formation, a ship larger than some moons began to take shape, its presence alone causing spatial distortions visible to the naked eye. The Judgment Throne, Draven whispered. The progenitors mean to conduct a full audit of galactic civilization. Lyra felt a strange calm settle over her. This was no longer about humanity's membership in the collective. This was about survival. Not just for humans but for every species in the galaxy. Then we don't run, she said firmly. We do what humans do best. What's that? Thane asked. She smiled, but there was no humor in it. We improvise. The challenge? The celestial throne chamber had transformed overnight. Where once stood symbols of peace and unity, now weapon systems lined the walls, energy shields flickered across strategic points, and the council members sat in full battle regalia. The dignified representatives of galactic civilization had become frightened rulers facing their own extinction. Lyra stood once again before them, but this time she wasn't alone. Draven had brought 12 other Keldron warriors. A Namathi subcollective of 5,000 minds had broken from the main consciousness to join them. Even 3 Vrex, including a young warrior named Shardax, had defected. They were a tiny fraction of the collective's population, but they represented something more dangerous than any army. They represented doubt. Traitors, Crystallix spat at the Vrex who stood with Lyra. You betray your own kind for these primitive humans? I betray stagnation, Shardax replied, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into aggressive patterns. I choose evolution. Supreme Arbiter Zephyn's form was more solid now, as if the crisis had forced him to become more real, more present. Commander Voss, you should be fleeing with the other observer species. Instead, you bring dissent into our council chambers during our darkest hour. Explain. You called the progenitors to deal with us, Lyra said, her voice carrying across the vast space. To judge humanity unworthy so you wouldn't have to make the decision yourselves. But they're not just here for us, are they? They're here to judge all of you. A Namathi elder spoke, its voice is slightly out of sync now, betraying internal conflict. The progenitors arrive every million years. We have always passed their judgment. We have built a civilization of peace, of order, of cowardice, Dr. Winters interrupted, stepping forward beside Lyra. We accessed your restricted archives. 3 times in your history the progenitors have come. Each time, you've passed their judgment by demonstrating technological advancement and cultural unity. But this time is different, isn't it? Kale activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. Data streams showed the collective's progress over millennia, a graph that rose steadily upward for eons before flattening into a plateau exactly 237 years ago. You stopped advancing, Kale continued. You achieved a level of stability and then froze. No major technological breakthroughs. No expansion. No cultural evolution. You created the perfect museum of what you once were, but you stopped being alive. We chose sustainability over reckless growth, a Keldron elder argued. We chose wisdom over dangerous experimentation. You chose fear, Lyra countered. And now the progenitors are here to see what you've become. What do you think they'll find? Before anyone could answer, the chamber's systems went haywire. Every holographic display activated simultaneously, showing the same image. A being of pure energy standing in what appeared to be the command deck of the massive judgment throne. Its form was vaguely humanoid but shifted between states of matter as easily as breathing. Children of the collective, the progenitor's voice was neither male nor female, old nor young. It simply was. I am Archon Vexorus, voice of the eternal arbiters. We have observed your development across the cosmic years. The time has come for judgment. Zephyr rose from his throne, his form taking on a desperate solidity. Great Archon, we have maintained peace across 47 species for thousands of years. We have eliminated war, poverty, disease. We have created a paradise among the stars. You have created a tomb, Vexorus replied without malice. A beautiful tomb where nothing changes, nothing grows, nothing lives in any meaningful sense. You have failed the fundamental test of existence, the courage to become more than you are. Terror rippled through the council. Lyra could see it in their postures, hear it in the sudden silence. They had built their entire civilization on the belief that they had achieved perfection. Now they were being told they'd achieved extinction. However, Vexorus continued, and the chamber held its collective breath, we sense something new. A variable we did not anticipate. A young species barely emerged from their homeworld, yet they have caused more disruption to your order in 15 years than has occurred in 2 centuries. The progenitor's attention focused on Lyra, and she felt the weight of it like gravity increasing 100-fold. Humanity. The unplanned element. Fascinating. We're not seeking your approval, Lyra said, though every instinct screamed at her to show deference. We came to join the collective, but we've seen what it truly is. A cage disguised as paradise. Commander Voss speaks out of turn, Zephyr interjected desperately. She does not represent. She represents what you have forgotten, Vexorus said. The fire that drives evolution. The refusal to accept limitations. The arrogance to believe that existence can be improved upon. The progenitor paused as if considering something profound. We will offer you a choice, collective. A test that will determine the fate of all species under your governance. A holographic display materialized, showing a solar system at the edge of collective space. This system contains a phenomenon you call the silence. It is, in fact, a prison. Billions of years ago, before we seeded life across the galaxy, we encountered another force. An entity of pure entropy that sought to unmake reality itself. We imprisoned it, bound it in dimensional folds so complex that no species should be able to even perceive it, let alone free it. Draven's gravity field spiked with recognition. That's why you stopped exploring. You found the prison. The collective discovered it 240 years ago, Vexorus confirmed. Rather than study it, seek to understand it, or even inform us of its destabilization, they chose to hide. To pull back. To pretend the problem didn't exist. The accusations hung in the air like poison. Lyra saw council members looking at each other, their unity cracking. The prison is failing, Vexorus continued. In approximately 1 solar cycle, it will collapse entirely, releasing the Unmaker into your dimension. If that occurs, everything you have built, everything we have seeded, will cease to exist. What do you propose? Zephyr asked, his voice hollow. A trial, Vexorus said. Humanity will lead an expedition to the prison. They will attempt to reinforce it using whatever means they devise. If they succeed, the collective will continue under new leadership. If they fail, all species will be judged unworthy and removed, making way for new life to evolve. Crystallix rose in fury. You would entrust the fate of the galaxy to these primitives? They have no understanding of dimensional mechanics, no experience with... They have something you lack, Vexorus interrupted. Hope. The irrational belief that impossible problems have solutions. We will observe their attempt. And we will judge all of you by how you choose to help or hinder them. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in chaos. Arguments erupted across species lines. Some called for Lyra's immediate execution. Others demanded to know how long the council had hidden the truth about the silence. The perfect order of the collective was disintegrating in real time. Lyra looked at her companions. Draven, Shardax, the Namathi subcollective, Dr. Winters, Ambassador Thane. A handful of beings from different species who had chosen change over safety. "We're going to need a ship," she said calmly. "We're going to need an army," Kale corrected. Lyra smiled. "Then we'd better start recruiting. The progenitors just gave us permission to shake up the entire galaxy. Let's not waste it." The gathering storm. The shipyard at Axiom Prime's southern dock had been abandoned for a century. Ships this old were considered museum pieces, relics of a more adventurous age before the collective decided that exploration was too dangerous. But Lyra saw potential in the forgotten vessels. The Eclipse Runner had once been a deep space reconnaissance ship, built by the Keldron at the height of their expansionist era. It was armed, fast, and most importantly, it had been designed for crew members who thought independently rather than in the collective's synchronized manner. "Life support is functional," Kale reported, his cybernetic eye interfacing directly with the ship's ancient computer systems. "Engines will need recalibration, but we can do that en route. Weapons systems are 3 generations out of date but still deadly." "How many can she hold?" Lyra asked, walking through the bridge. Dust covered every surface but the bones were good. "Designed for a crew of 30, but we can pack in 100 if we don't mind being cozy," Draven rumbled, his massive form barely fitting through the doorways. They had 72 hours before the progenitors expected them to depart. 72 hours to recruit a crew, gather supplies, and prepare for a mission that might determine the fate of galactic civilization. No pressure. Ambassador Thane entered the bridge, his diplomatic composure finally restored. "The Council is in complete disarray. Half of them want to execute us for causing this crisis. The other half want to join us because they see it as their only chance for survival. We're not taking Council members," Lyra said firmly. "We need people who can think creatively, who aren't trapped in collective dogma. Misfits. Outcasts. The ones who never quite fit into the perfect order. So we're building a crew of rejects to save the galaxy," Shardax observed, his crystalline form refracting the ship's emergency lighting into rainbows. "The progenitors have a twisted sense of humor." Over the next 48 hours the impossible crew came together. A Vrex engineer named Tessara who'd been exiled for proposing radical fusion designs. A Namathi named Chorus of 7 who'd been separated from the main consciousness for developing individual thoughts. A human pilot, Commander Jana Rhodes, who'd been dishonorably discharged from the collective's defense fleet for excessive improvisation. A Keldron scientist called Nexar who'd spent 20 years studying the silence against direct council orders. Each brought their own skills, their own reasons for joining. Each represented a crack in the collective's perfect facade. "You understand what we're asking," Lyra told them as they assembled in the Eclipse Runner's cargo bay. "We're flying to a prison holding something that could end existence itself. We have no solid plan. The progenitors are watching our every move. The Council wants us to fail. And even if we succeed, we might not survive." "So why do it?" asked Tessara. "Because someone has to," Lyra replied simply. "Because the alternative is sitting here waiting for the end. Because maybe, just maybe, we can prove that the galaxy doesn't have to choose between stagnant order and chaotic destruction." Nexar stepped forward, activating a holographic display of the prison system. "I've been studying the silence for 2 decades. The progenitors were partially correct. It is a prison, but it's not just holding something. It's actively suppressing it, using dimensional fields that phase the entity out of sync with our reality." "Can it be reinforced?" Gil asked. "Not with any technology the collective possesses," Nexar admitted. "The mathematics involved are beyond our current understanding. But there's something else. Something I discovered in my research but never reported because the Council would have buried it." He adjusted the hologram and Lyra saw something that made her heart race. A structure, ancient beyond measure, orbiting the prison. "That's not progenitor technology," Dr. Winters breathed. "No," Nexar confirmed. "It's older. Pre-progenitor. Possibly from the species that existed before them. I believe it's the original lock on the prison. The progenitors didn't create the prison. They inherited it. And they don't know how to fix it either." The implications crashed through Lyra's mind like a tidal wave. "They're testing us to see if we can solve a problem they can't solve themselves. Or they're using us as a sacrificial probe," Chorus of 7 offered, its multiple voices tinged with cynicism. "Sending us to die while gathering data for their own attempt. Either way," Draven said, his gravity field pulsing with determination, "we have the coordinates. We have a ship. We have a crew insane enough to try." Jana Rhodes powered up the navigation systems. "Flight path to the silence will take us through 3 contested territories. The Fringe Raiders have been getting bolder since the Council's authority started cracking. We'll need to be ready for hostiles. Let them come, Shardak said, his crystalline blades extending. I've been waiting for a real fight. As the crew dispersed to their stations, Lyra found herself on the observation deck, staring at Axiom Prime. The station was in chaos. Ships were leaving in droves as species representatives panicked. The perfect order of 3 centuries was dissolving in days. Zephyr materialized beside her, his form more solid than she'd ever seen it, as if the crisis had forced him to become truly real. Commander Voss. A moment. Come to try and stop us? Lyra asked without turning. No. To apologize. The ancient being's voice carried genuine remorse. You were right about us. About me. We built a cage and called it civilization. We chose comfort over growth, safety over purpose. When we discovered the prison, I convinced the council to hide rather than act. I told myself it was wisdom. It was cowardice. Why tell me this? Because you're about to risk everything for a galaxy that rejected you. Because you deserve to know that at least one member of the council recognizes what you truly are. And what's that? What we used to be, Zephyr said softly. Before we forgot how. He reached out and a small device materialized in his hand. This contains every classified file about the prison. Every observation, every theory we suppressed. It won't be enough, but it's something. Lyra took the device. If we succeed, things are going to change. The collective as you know it is over. Good, Zephyr replied. It should have ended long ago. The question is what will replace it. As the Supreme Arbiter faded away, Lyra felt the ship shudder to life beneath her feet. The engines were powering up. The crew was ready. In minutes, they would launch into the unknown, carrying the hopes and fears of countless species. She activated her communicator. All hands, this is Commander Voss. We launch in 10 minutes. Check your gear, say your prayers if you have them, and remember, we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for the right to determine our own future. No more hiding. No more waiting for someone else to solve our problems. We do this ourselves. The Eclipse runner disengaged from the dock, its ancient engines burning bright against the darkness. Behind them, Axiom Prime continued to fracture. Ahead, the prison waited, along with something ancient and hungry. And somewhere beyond it all, the progenitors watched, waiting to see if their children had finally learned to grow up. The real test was about to begin. Into the abyss. The silence was aptly named. As the Eclipse runner dropped out of fold space at the edge of the prison system, every sensor went haywire before dying completely. Silence filled the communication channels. The stars themselves seemed muted, their light struggling to penetrate the dimensional distortions that surrounded the ancient prison. Well, that's unsettling, Jana muttered from the pilot station. Navigation is showing we're in 3 different locations simultaneously. Quantum positioning is worthless here. Dr. Winters studied the readings with growing concern. Space-time is folded in ways that shouldn't be possible. The prison isn't just containing the entity. It's removing it from normal reality entirely. And it's failing, Nexar added, pointing at the holographic display. See these fractures? The dimensional walls are cracking. We have less time than the progenitors estimated. Maybe 48 hours before catastrophic collapse. Lyra stood at the bridge's center, her combat instincts screaming warnings. They were approaching something that had terrified beings powerful enough to seed galaxies. Something that existed to unmake existence itself. The ancient structure, she said, focusing on what they could control. That's our target. Nexar, what do we know about it? The Keldron scientist brought up enhanced scans. It's massive. Roughly the size of a small moon, constructed from materials that don't exist in any modern database. The architecture suggests it predates the progenitors by billions of years. Whatever species built it had an understanding of physics that makes our knowledge look primitive. Can we dock with it? Lyra asked Jana. Assuming it doesn't atomize us on approach, yes. There's what looks like a docking port, or at least an opening large enough for the ship. Then that's our move. But we go in prepared. Draven, I want security teams ready. Tessara, keep the engines hot in case we need to run. Kale, you're with me on the exploration team. As they approached the structure, Lyra felt something she'd never experienced before. A pressure on her mind, like someone trying to push thoughts into her consciousness. Images of entropy, decay, the heat death of universes. The ending of all things. Everyone else feeling that? Shardax asked, his crystalline form flickering unstably. It's the entity, Chorus of 7 responded, its multiple voices struggling to maintain harmony. Even imprisoned, it broadcasts its nature. This is what it does. What it is. The end of everything. The structure loomed larger, filling their view screens. Its surface was covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, geometric patterns that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. As they neared the docking port, those symbols began to glow. "It's reacting to us," Dr. Winters said with wonder and terror. "It knows we're here." The Eclipse runner settled into the dock with surprising ease, magnetic clamps engaging automatically despite billions of years of abandonment. The airlock showed a breathable atmosphere beyond, though the composition was unlike anything in their databases. 6-person team, Lyra decided. Kale, Draven, Shardax, Nexar, Dr. Winters, and me. Everyone else stays on the ship ready for emergency extraction. If we're not back in 6 hours or if anything goes wrong, leave without us. Absolutely not, Jana protested. That's an order, Commander Rhodes. If we fail, someone needs to get back to warn the collective. Someone needs to tell them what's coming. The exploration team gathered at the airlock, each carrying equipment that seemed laughably inadequate for the task ahead. Scanning devices, energy weapons, translation matrices. Tools designed for exploring planets, not unraveling the mysteries of pre-progenitor civilizations. The airlock opened and they stepped into something impossible. The interior of the structure defied physics. Corridors stretched in directions that didn't exist. Gravity shifted without warning. Walls were sometimes solid, sometimes transparent, revealing vistas of the prison's dimensional mechanisms. The entity was visible from certain angles, a writhing mass of non-existence that strained against its bonds. "Don't look at it directly," Nexar warned. "Observing it gives it power. It exists in the spaces between perception and reality." They moved deeper, following the strongest energy signatures. The structure seemed to guide them, corridors opening before them and sealing behind, as if it wanted them to reach the center. "It's alive," Dr. Winters realized. "Not the entity. The prison itself. It's a living machine maintaining itself across eons." "Then why is it failing?" Lyra asked. "Because it's old. Tired. Imagine running a machine for billions of years without maintenance, without rest. Even the most perfect creation eventually breaks down." They reached a central chamber that made Lyra's mind reel. It was simultaneously vast and tiny, close and infinitely distant. At its center floated a crystalline matrix, pulsing with fading light. Each pulse was slightly weaker than the last. "The core," Nexar breathed. "This is what maintains the dimensional lock. And it's dying." Kale's cybernetic eye was processing data at maximum capacity. "I'm detecting a pattern in the decay. It's not random degradation. Something is actively draining it." "The entity," Shardax said. "It's been feeding on its prison for eons. Slowly, patiently waiting for the moment it could break free." Draven's gravity field extended toward the core, trying to sense its composition. "We need to feed it energy. Massive amounts of it. More than our ship's entire power output." "Then we use the ship," Lyra said simply. "That would leave us stranded here," Dr. Winters protested. "Better stranded than dead along with the entire galaxy." Before they could debate further, the chamber shuddered. The entity had sensed their presence at the core and it was reacting. The dimensional walls began cracking faster, and through the fractures, tendrils of pure entropy reached toward them. "Move!" Lyra shouted, but there was nowhere to run. The tendrils passed through matter like it wasn't there, seeking not their bodies but their very existence. Shardax stepped forward, his crystalline form refracting light into coherent beams. He fired at the tendrils and surprisingly they recoiled. "Light. It's vulnerable to concentrated light." The team formed a defensive circle, each using whatever tools they had to generate illumination. Kale's cybernetic eye projected a scanning laser. Draven manipulated gravity to compress starlight into focused beams. Dr. Winters activated emergency flares. But it wasn't enough. The entity was vast, and they were 6 individuals with limited resources. For every tendril they drove back, 3 more emerged from the cracking walls. Then Lyra understood. The entity wasn't attacking them specifically. It was attacking everything. It couldn't distinguish between threats and obstacles because to it, all existence was the same, something to be unmade. "It doesn't think," she said aloud. "It can't strategize. It just consumes. That's its weakness." She ran to the core, ignoring the warnings from her team. The crystalline matrix was warm to the touch, pulsing weakly like a dying heart. She placed her hand on it and felt loneliness. The prison wasn't just a machine. It was a guardian that had stood watch for eternity, and it was finally failing not from weakness but from exhaustion. "I'm sorry," Lyra whispered to it. But we need you to hold on just a little longer. She activated her communicator. Jana, I need you to do something insane. Fly the Eclipse Runner into the structure. Bring it to my coordinates and prepare to transfer all power to an external conduit. Commander, that's suicide. It's our only chance. Trust me. Minutes felt like hours as the entity's assault intensified. Draven was wounded, his gravity field flickering. Shardax's crystalline body showed cracks. Nexar was calculating furiously, trying to find another solution, any solution. Then the Eclipse Runner appeared, phasing through the impossible geometry of the structure. Jana had done it, navigating dimensional paradoxes that would have destroyed most pilots. Tessara, route all power to the forward coupling, Lyra commanded. We're going to jumpstart a prison. The Vrex engineer's voice crackled through the comm. This will burn out every system we have. We'll be dead in space. Then we better make it count. Kale and Dr. Winters worked frantically, connecting the ship's power systems to the crystalline core using jury-rigged cables and pure desperation. The entity sensed what they were doing and redoubled its assault, but the team held the line. Now! Lyra shouted. The Eclipse Runner's engines roared, pouring centuries of accumulated fusion energy into the ancient core. The crystalline matrix blazed with light, brighter than a star, and the dimensional walls solidified. The entity's tendrils were severed, retreating back into the spaces between reality. The prison held. For now. As the team collapsed in exhaustion, Lyra saw something that made her smile despite everything. The crystalline core's pulse was stronger, steadier. They hadn't just patched it. They'd given it hope. Judgment Day. The Eclipse Runner drifted powerless in the void, its systems burned out from the massive energy transfer. Inside, the crew worked frantically to restore basic life support while Lyra's team made their way back from the prison structure. Engines are gone, Tessara reported grimly. Full drive is slag. We've got minimal power for life support and that's it. We're not flying out of here. Jana slammed her fist against the console. So we save the galaxy and get to die in the emptiness. Perfect. We completed the mission, Lyra said, climbing back onto the bridge. Her combat suit was scorched, her face showed exhaustion, but her eyes burned with fierce pride. The prison is stabilized. The entity is contained. That's what matters. For how long? Chorus of 7 asked, its voices discordant with worry. We gave it a boost but we did not repair it. The decay will continue. Nexar nodded slowly. I estimate we bought maybe 1,000 years. Perhaps 2,000 if we're fortunate. A long time for individuals but nothing on cosmic scales. Dr. Winters pulled up the data they'd gathered from the prison core. But we learned something crucial. The prison's design, the mathematics behind the dimensional folding. This isn't just a temporary fix. This is knowledge the progenitors don't have. Knowledge that dies with us, Kale pointed out, gesturing at their dead ship. Before anyone could respond, space itself tore open. Not a fold space entry but reality literally splitting apart. Through the rift came the massive judgment throne, and with it, a presence that made every being on the Eclipse Runner drop to their knees involuntarily. Archon Vexorus materialized on their bridge, its energy form casting impossible shadows. Humanity. Collective dissidence. Your mission is complete. We have observed everything. Are we being rescued or executed? Lyra managed to ask, fighting to stand under the weight of the progenitor's presence. Neither. You are being judged. Vexorus gestured and holographic displays filled the bridge, showing not just their mission but events across the entire collective. While you fought at the prison, the galaxy watched. Every species saw the Council's lies exposed. Every individual learned that their leaders chose hiding over heroism. The display showed riots on Axiom Prime. Council members being removed from power. Species representatives demanding change, reform, truth. The perfect order of the collective was in complete collapse. You succeeded in your mission, Vexorus continued, but you created something far more significant. You reminded the galaxy what it means to evolve. To risk. To choose growth over safety. So we pass your test? Thane asked hopefully. The test was never about the prison, Vexorus said, and for the first time, something like warmth entered its voice. The prison has been failing for eons. We could have repaired it ourselves at any time. Stunned silence filled the bridge. Lyra felt anger rising through her exhaustion. You used us. This was all theater. It was a catalyst, Vexorus corrected. The collective was dying, not from external threats but from internal stagnation. They had achieved stability and mistaken it for success. We needed to break their complacency to show them what they had become. And if we'd failed? Draven demanded. If the prison had collapsed? We would have contained the entity ourselves and removed the collective entirely, allowing new species to rise. Your success meant both problems could be solved. The prison stabilized and the collective reborn. Shardax's crystalline form flickered with fury. You gambled billions of lives on a social experiment. We gambled nothing, Vexorus replied calmly. We knew humans would succeed because we studied you carefully. Your species has a unique trait. You believe problems exist to be solved, not endured. That belief, that irrational optimism, is the fuel of evolution. Lyra stepped forward, meeting the progenitor's gaze directly despite the crushing pressure. You talk about evolution, but you're still controlling everything. Making decisions for us. Manipulating events. That's not growth. That's just a different kind of cage. The Judgment Throne's presence intensified, and for a moment, Lyra thought she'd gone too far. Then Vexorus did something unexpected. It laughed. Perfectly stated, the progenitor said. Which is why we are leaving. The holographic displays changed, showing star charts expanding outward from the collective space. For 4 billion years we have guided younger species. We have judged, directed, intervened. We thought ourselves benevolent gardeners tending the galaxy's growth. But you have shown us the truth, we have become obstacles. You're abandoning the galaxy? Dr. Winters asked in disbelief. We are granting it independence, Vexorus corrected. The progenitors will retreat beyond the galactic rim. We will observe from a distance, but we will no longer intervene. What happens next is entirely up to you. The prison, Nexar began, will be your responsibility. We will provide the knowledge to maintain it, but the work must be yours. The collective, the silence, the future of all civilizations in this galaxy, all of it now rests with the species who live here. Vexorus turned its full attention to Lyra. Humanity will not join the collective as it was. Instead, you will help build what comes next. A coalition of species choosing cooperation without sacrificing independence. Growth without stagnation. Unity without uniformity. That's going to be messy, Lyra said. Precisely, Vexorus agreed. Messy, chaotic, unpredictable. Alive. Everything the old collective was not. The progenitor began to fade, its form dissipating into light. Your ship will be repaired and returned to Axiom Prime. The data you gathered from the prison will revolutionize dimensional physics. And the species of this galaxy will remember that 6 individuals armed with nothing but determination changed everything. As Vexorus vanished completely, the Eclipse Runner systems began powering back up, restored by technology beyond comprehension. Through the view screens they saw the Judgment Throne turning away, preparing to depart the galaxy forever. Janna brought up communications and suddenly they were flooded with messages. From the collective, from independent species, from individuals across dozens of worlds. All asking the same question, what happens now? Lyra looked at her crew, human, Keldrin, Vrex, Namathi, all species who had chosen to risk everything for a chance at something better. Now we go home and start building. No more hiding from problems. No more waiting for someone else to save us. The council won't go quietly, Thane warned. Good, Lyra smiled. I'd be disappointed if they did. We're going to argue, disagree, make mistakes and probably mess everything up a dozen times before we get it right. Sounds terrible, Shardax observed. Sounds alive, Lyra corrected. Set course for Axiom Prime, Commander Rhodes. We've got a galaxy to remake. New dawn. The celestial throne chamber had changed. Where once stood symbols of the council's absolute authority, now sat a circular table. No elevated thrones, no power displays, just equal seating for representatives from every species in what was being called the Galactic Assembly. Lyra stood at the entrance once more, but this time she wasn't alone or unwelcome. Behind her stood the crew of the Eclipse Runner, each now representing their own movements for change within their species. And beyond them, thousands more who had been inspired by their mission. 3 months had passed since their return from the prison. 3 months of chaos, transformation, and rebirth. The old council had dissolved within weeks. Zephin had voluntarily stepped down, admitting publicly to centuries of mistakes. Some former council members faced trials for suppressing information about the silence. Others, like Crystallix, had fled to the outer systems, attempting to maintain the old order with dwindling support. But most had chosen adaptation over extinction. Commander Voss, a familiar voice called. It was Zephin, now simply an advisor rather than supreme arbiter. His form was more fluid now, less forced into solidity, as if surrendering ultimate power had allowed him to become more truly himself. The assembly is ready for your report. Lyra entered the chamber, taking her seat among the circle. Around her sat representatives from all 47 original collective species, plus 12 new ones who had emerged from isolation once they learned the old rules were being rewritten. Humans had been granted full status, not as subordinates but as equal partners. The prison stabilization is holding, Nexar reported, bringing up holographic displays. However, as predicted, it's still degrading. We estimate 2,000 years before critical failure. 2,000 years is not enough, said a Vrex representative, not Crystallix but a younger warrior named Prism who had led the reformist movement within her species. We need a permanent solution. Dr. Winters stood, activating his own data. Which is why we've established the Dimensional Research Initiative. 20 species have contributed scientists. We're using the mathematics from the prison's core to develop entirely new technologies. Not just to maintain the prison, but to understand the fundamental nature of reality itself. And we're sharing all findings openly, Kale added. No more classified knowledge. No more suppressed discoveries. Every breakthrough is published immediately to all species. A Namathi representative, speaking with a single voice rather than the old harmonized thousands, raised a concern. This openness has led to weapons development. The Fringe Raiders have used our published gravitational research to enhance their ships. Yes, Lyra acknowledged. And the Keldron Defense Fleet has used the same research to protect trade routes. Knowledge is neutral. How we choose to use it is what matters. We can't prevent misuse by hiding information. We prevent it by building a galaxy where cooperation is more beneficial than conflict. An idealistic view, scoffed a Keldron elder who still clung to the old ways. A necessary view, Draven countered, his massive form radiating calm authority. He had become the voice of Keldron reformists, arguing that true strength came from adaptability, not rigid tradition. The old collective proved that perfect order leads to death. We must accept imperfection or face extinction. The debate continued for hours as it did every session. Arguments about resource allocation, territorial disputes, technological ethics, species rights. It was messy, frustrating, and occasionally infuriating. It was also alive. During a recess, Lyra found herself on the observation deck where she'd once spoken with Zephan. Ambassador Thane joined her, looking exhausted but satisfied. You know, he said, I spent my entire career learning to navigate the collective's rigid protocols. Now I have to negotiate with 47 species who all want different things and aren't afraid to fight for them. It's chaos. It's democracy, Lyra corrected with a smile. Humanity figured that out a few centuries ago. It's not efficient, but it works better than anything else we've tried. The progenitors were right about you, Thane observed. Your irrational optimism is contagious. Through the viewport they watched construction crews, mixed species teams, working on expanding Axiom Prime. The station was being transformed from a symbol of centralized control into a true hub of cooperation. Species who had barely spoken to each other for centuries now worked side by side. Jana Rhodes approached, her pilot's uniform replaced by the insignia of the new exploratory service. Commander Voss, we've got the go-ahead for the first deep space mission beyond the Helios border. Volunteers from 15 species. We launch in 2 weeks. The first exploration mission in 200 years, Dr. Winters said, joining them. We're finally looking outward again instead of hiding. What are you hoping to find? Thane asked. I don't know, Jana admitted. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. That's the point. We stopped asking what's out there, and started asking, how do we avoid what's out there? Time to remember that the universe is full of wonders, not just threats. Shardax arrived, his crystalline form still bearing hairline fractures from the battle at the prison. He refused to have them repaired, saying they were reminders of what they'd accomplished. The Vrex Home Council has agreed to open its military academies to other species. We're teaching our combat techniques to anyone interested. That's a massive shift, Lyra said, impressed. The Vrex had guarded their martial knowledge for millennia. We learned something from you humans, Shardax replied. Strength isn't about what you can do alone. It's about what you can accomplish together. Besides, teaching forces us to explain our methods, which means understanding them better ourselves. Everyone benefits. Chorus of 7 materialized nearby, its presence no longer overwhelming but gentle. The Namathi collective had fragmented into thousands of smaller groups, each developing its own perspective while maintaining connection to the whole. I have news from the prison. The first maintenance rotation has been established. Every species contributes personnel for 3-month shifts. The entity remains contained. And the silence? Lyra asked. We've renamed it, Chorus of 7 said. It's now called the Vigil. Because it's not about silence anymore. It's about watching, maintaining, ensuring that what must be contained remains so. It's become a symbol of our commitment to each other. Draven's deep voice rumbled with approval. My people have a saying, the tallest mountain requires the strongest foundation. We are building that foundation now, one species at a time, one alliance at a time. As the assembly reconvened, Lyra took her seat once more. The agenda showed 17 items requiring discussion, votes, and compromise. There would be disagreements. Some species would leave dissatisfied. Nothing would be perfect, but they would be moving forward. Before we begin, Lyra said, standing to address the assembly, I want to propose something. A memorial. Not to celebrate our victory at the prison but to honor what we learned. A monument inscribed with a simple truth. Perfect order is death. Growth requires risk. The future belongs to those brave enough to face uncertainty. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then Zephyr spoke, his voice carrying the weight of ancient regret and new hope. I support this proposal. Let it stand at the entrance to this chamber so that every being who enters remembers why we changed. Why we chose chaos over stagnation. The vote was unanimous. As the session continued into the evening, Lyra felt a presence she'd learned to recognize. Though the progenitors had left the galaxy, sometimes she sensed them watching from beyond the rim. Not interfering, just observing. Seeing what their children would become without guidance. She hoped they were proud. More importantly, she hoped they understood that true evolution meant letting go, allowing the next generation to make their own mistakes and forge their own destiny. The galaxy's future was uncertain. There would be conflicts, setbacks, failures. But there would also be discoveries, alliances, triumphs. The collective had chosen safety and nearly died. The new assembly chose growth and would live. As the session adjourned and representatives from dozens of species mingled, arguing and laughing and planning, Lyra smiled. This was what the progenitors had wanted to see. Not perfection but potential. Not order but life. The humans had faced the council and shown them a mirror. What the galaxy chose to see in that reflection would determine everything. And for the first time in centuries, the choice was truly theirs to make. The stars waited, full of infinite possibilities, and finally the children of the galaxy were ready to explore them once more.